Jaya Madhova Kunjabi Hare Madhova Kunjabi Hare Gopi Janabalaba Giribaro Daguti Gopi Janabalaba Giribaro Daguti Yasodananda Braja Janaranda Guna Yasodananda Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tera Manachari Yamuna Tera Manachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunjabi Raguti Jai Radha Madhava Kunjabi Raguti Gopi Jana Bhalaba Girivara Dhalse Gopi Jana Bhalaba Girivara Dhalse Yasodhanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Brajadana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Manachauti Yamuna Tira Manachauti Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihagati Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihagati Madhava Bihagati Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Tada Satishi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chalanana Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidway the Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Gajay Sri Sri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturadam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Go. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namaham Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Budle Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachate Shatarni. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 54th chapter, text 38. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Maivasman Swadvi Asuyeta Ratur Vairupya Chinzya Sukha Dukkha Do Na Chanyo Asti Yata Swa Krita Buk Puvan Maivasman Sadvasuyeta Ratur Vairupya Chintiya Sukha Dukkha Dona Chanyosti Yatha Swakrita Bhupuman Maivasman Sadvasuyeta Ratur Vairupya Chintiya Sukha Dukkha Dona Chanyosti Yatha Swakrita Bhupuman Maivasman Sadvasuyeta Ratur Vairupya Chintiya Sukha Dukkha Dona Chanyosti Yatha Swakrita Bhupuman. Okay. Okay. Ma, please do not. Eva, indeed. Asman, toward us. Sattvi, O saintly lady. Asuyeta, feel inimical. Bratu, of your brother. Vairupya, over the disfigurement. Chintaya, out of concern. Sukha, of happiness. Dukkha, and unhappiness. Da, bestower. Na, not. Cha, and. Anya, anyone else. Asti, there is. Yata, since. Swa, of his own. Krita, action. Bhuk, the sufferer of the reaction. Puman, a man. Translation, saintly lady, please do not be displeased with us out of anxiety for your brother's disfigurement. No one but oneself is responsible for one's joy and grief, for a man experiences the result of his own deeds. You can repeat. Saintly lady, please do not be displeased with us out of anxiety for your brother's disfigurement. No one but oneself is responsible for one's joy and grief. For a man experiences the result of his own deeds. So there's no commentary by the followers of this divine grace Srila Prabhupada, so I'm going to read the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami. So first, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states, in order to remove the sorrow of Rukmini, he reasons with her in this verse. Every jiva must enjoy or suffer the results of his acts. So what is this useless affection for a person who is evil and who acts against your husband? He gives a hint of scolding to Rukmini. And Jiva Goswami states, though Balaram spoke to Krishna in this way, Rukmini did not give up her grief. He then consoled her directly in this verse, do not ascribe fault to Krishna and others. Do not ascribe fault at all, even if there is cause. On the other hand, happiness and distress are not caused by others, but by oneself, since the jiva, Puman, enjoys the result of his karma. Very interesting verse. So again, my vasman, sad vasuyeta, varatura vai rupya chintya, sukaduka dono chanyo sti, yata swakrita bhuk Puman. So, omagana timirandasha, gananjana shlakaya chakshur, unmiditam yena, tasmai shigurave maha. So, today's topic is the topic of suffering and enjoyment. And where does it come from? Who is responsible for the suffering and enjoyment? So, generally, we tend to ascribe our suffering or enjoyment due to the immediate cause of that, what we consider to be the immediate perceivable cause for that. For example, someone comes up and yells at us, then we think that person caused me suffering, right? So let's refer to the story of Dharma the bull, famous story in the Bhagavatam. Dharma the bull and Bhumi the cow being harassed, at least apparently, by the personality of Kali. And so the bull's legs have been cut off, basically. 3 of the legs have been cut off and is standing on 1 leg. And the legs, of course, manifest or allegorically, they indicate the principles of religiosity, cleanliness, mercifulness, truthfulness, and austerity. So, Kali has done this, and Parikshit Maharaj, the great king, descendant of the Pandavas, comes, and he sees what's happening. This Kali, who's dressed as a king, dressed as a leader, but actually he's a misleader. He has done this. And so Parikshit Maharaj asks the bull, Dharma, what or who has done this to you? And Dharma doesn't blame Kali. It's interesting. Normally, we have friends and enemies in this world, and we blame the enemies for our suffering, or or attribute the enjoyment to our friends. But actually, Dharma the bull understood it was due to the time factor. It was due to the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, therefore, he didn't blame Kali, which is quite interesting. Of course, that doesn't mean that if a criminal has done something, the criminal should not be punished. Because that criminal, even though it is the action of the time factor, the karma, the will of the Lord, whatever, then still that person is responsible for being the immediate agent. So that's another factor. We don't blame the person, but karmically, that person is responsible for being the agent of your own your karma, or whatever is supposed to happen to you. Okay, so that's a very interesting point. But then we just think that, therefore, everything is under the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he's the one to blame. Isn't it? Either he's the one to blame, or he just lost control. And of course, there was this famous book during the 1960s, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People and Good Things Happen to Bad People. And it was authored by an interesting person who sounded like Hare Krishna, but it was Harvey Cushman or something like that. So, and he has said that bad things happen in this world, good things happen in this world, just due to, chance. Things are happening because of chance, which is not really true. And he said that God, he believed in God. He was a Jewish guy. But he also believed in God in what's called the prime mover. It means the person who started the ball game going, or created the material world, or created the Big Bang, and then, he remained transcendent. He has his own life. So this is not actually true. So should we be blaming God for our suffering and enjoyment? Let's talk about it. Because we are suffering, mostly suffering. And as Prabhupada said, the enjoyment is simply the cessation of the suffering for some time. And Lord Chaitanya gave the example of the dunking stool. The dunking stool is a punishment that used to be used in America and also in India, where they would lower someone, it was like a seesaw. They would lower someone into the water and hold them underwater, if it was a criminal, not just to torture them for no reason whatsoever, until basically 3 minutes or something, whatever it is, until they were going to die because they weren't getting any air, or they were going to breathe in the water, and let them up. And as soon as they were brought up, wow, this is happiness. Just like, I experienced in my life getting older, that when you wake up in the morning and there's no pain, and you're not completely exhausted, wow, this is ecstatic. Isn't it? I guess old people can appreciate this particular thing. So Lord Chaitanya described that the happiness in this world is due to that. So mainly distress. Brahma bhuvana loka punavavartana arjuna mama pechanakamtaya punajanmana vijate dukalayama shashvatam. I mean, there's many, many different. Because why is it mostly distress? Because in the spiritual world, of which this material world is a reflection, it's only happiness. So the reflection of only happiness is only distress. This 15th chapter of the Gita describes this world as like the banyan tree, the upside down banyan tree with the branches up, the branches down and the roots up, etc. So therefore, people tend to blame God or the arrangement of this material world because, Krishna arranged it. He arranges it to Kalima Shashvatam. That's his arrangement. So is it God's fault that we are suffering in a certain way? And not really. The reason we are suffering ultimately is actually due to separation from Krishna. Because without being connected to Krishna, there's no happiness. And, Prabhupada, the typical example that Prabhupada always gives is the fish outside of the water. You take the fish outside of the water, and there is no happiness. No matter what you give the fish, you may try to your utmost. Just like we're trying to our utmost to give ourselves some material amenities, facilities. You ladies like to buy clothes. Men like gadgets or whatever. And it just doesn't happen because it's not our nature. There's an interesting verses in this particular regard that I'm going to read. It's from the Madhya Lila, cause of the living entities is described in Madhya Lila 20, text 117. Famous verse. Krishna Buli Se Jiva Anadi Bhati Mukha Ataiva Maya Tari Deha Samsara Dukkha, which translates as, forgetting Krishna, the living entity, has been attracted by the external feature from time immemorial. So, in other words, it's our fault. Don't blame Krishna. You're in a suffering environment because you, Krishna, Buliya Sejiva, Anadir Bahiyamuka, you turned your face away from Krishna. Of course, this also involves the whole discussion of where did we come from? Did we come from the spiritual world? Or did we just happen to pop into the material world? Now, obviously, we're here because of some personal thing or decision that we made. Exactly how that took place is beyond our ability to comprehend. I was reading last night Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statements that if one tries to understand how the Jiva soul came into the material world, where the Jiva soul came from, then one will simply engage in argumentation. And actually, we've seen this in ISKCON, that ISKCON and, so many Gaudiyas, when people try to talk about or have arguments about the origin of the jiva, it simply is useless because nobody can win the argument because it's beyond our conception, beyond our ability to express even in words. Just like even scientifically, if we talk about what happened before the Big Bang, of course we know Krishna created this material world, and the Big Bang was the universe is expanding from the body of the Mahavishnu. But let's just talk from a scientific perspective. When you have a discussion of what happened before there was time or space, then it doesn't even make sense to have that discussion because if there's no time or space, then what can happen? In other words, you can't understand. It's beyond our ability to comprehend these things. So, but in any case, we can understand why we're in the material world. We don't understand how we got here. We don't really know completely, you know, the statements of Prabhupada in both regards. We originally with Krishna. Well, what does that mean? Were we dancing with Krishna, or were we just looking at Krishna's pastimes with binoculars? Obviously, not binoculars. But we know why we're here. Why? Because we made a choice. That's obvious. We made a choice. Krishna Buli Say Jiva Anadi. And here's this word, Anadi. It happened, sometimes described from time immemorial, but it means beyond time. Beyond time. I mean, how do you understand that? Anadi can't even understand time immemorial. Just like when I was in school, we tried to understand infinity. You take a number 8 and you put it on its side, and you get infinity. I don't understand infinity. I mean, I could talk about it theoretically. It's in time immemorial. And so, by Hirmukha, turn our face away from Krishna. Ataiva, therefore, Mayatare Deha Samsara Dukkha. Therefore, we got material miseries. Full translation is, forgetting Krishna, the living entity has been attracted by the external feature from time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy, Maya, gives him all kinds of misery in his material, existence. And I'm just going to read part of Prabhupada's purport. When the living entity forgets his constitutional position as an eternal servant of Krishna, there's that word, forget again. So that's why we're suffering. He is immediately entrapped by the illusory external energy. The living entity is originally part and parcel of Krishna, and therefore the superior energy of Krishna is endowed with inconceivable, minute energy that works inconceivably within the body. However, the living entity, forgetting his position, is situated in the material energy. And so there's more in this particular purport. Another verse in this particular regard that talks about the cause of suffering in this world is from the 11th canto, 2nd chapter, text 37 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this verse is oftentimes quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Vayam dvitiya viniveshata shat ishadapetasha vipariyo smriti tanmayato buddha avayijetam bhaktyaye kayesham gurudeva tatma. So fear is one of the miseries. Fear, and of course the other miseries in this world, rises when a living entity misidentifies himself with the material body because of absorption in the illusory energy of the Lord. There's another point. Yes, we're in the material world because we turn our face away from Krishna. And yes, we're suffering because of our upadi. Upadi means a designation or identification. Even the Buddhists understand this. We often talk about the Four Noble Truths that Buddhists talk about. Material world is suffering. Suffering is caused by attachment. And you give up the attachment, and the suffering goes away. So that's another cause. It's our fault. We're at fault. Just like here, it's being described that Rukmi is at fault. It's not Krishna's fault that he took off, shaved off, not only shaved off the hair of Rukmi, he actually cut it off at the root. I mean, I was reading this the other day and I was shocked when I heard this. It's one thing to shave one's head. It grows back. But Krishna, you know what it means, cutting off at the root of the hair? It means a gouging into the head. He gouged it into Rukmi's head. Unbelievable. So the hair wouldn't grow back, so he would look like that the rest of his life. He probably, anyway, at that time they didn't have plastic surgery or hair transplants. So in other words, Rukmi was personally responsible. So let me continue reading this. When the living absorption, anyway, oh no, I want to talk about something. So the way to counter that, to counter this suffering in the world, which is caused by attachment, is to give up the attachment and sarva apadi vinir muktam tatparadvaina nirmalam. What does that mean? Give up these upadis, but how do you give up these upadis? Nirmalam. Rishikena. Rishikesha. Sevanam. Bhakti uchate. That I am meant to please the Lord of the senses. Or Jivara Swarupahoy Nitya Krishna Das. So here's another statement. This is also from Prabhupada. This is from the Acharyas, because it's the 11th canto. When the living entity thus turns away from the supreme, and this is actually from the verse itself. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. So, anyway, here's the basic description of why we're suffering in this world. So then, to get more specific, the different sufferings and enjoyments of this world are not directly administered by Krishna. They're for those who are not Krishna conscious. We'll get to it, those who are Krishna conscious in a second. For those who are not Krishna conscious, it's simply under the laws of karma. Krishna has nothing to do with it other than he simply set the system up. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that illustrates this. It's actually good to clarify everything by citing verses. 13th chapter, text 21. Karya karana kartitve hetu prakritir uchate purusha sukadukhanam voktritve hetu uchate, which says nature. This is interesting. Try to understand this verse. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. In other words, Krishna sets up a system where there's a cause and effect. For example, if I jump off the dome, the second story of the dome, then the material energy is arranged in such a way that I will get smashed when I fall to the ground. Hopefully not too badly. So that's just the arrangement. It's like the laws of God, or as they often say, the law of gravity. It's interesting, law of gravity, because written by the lawgiver, Krishna. So nature is the cause of all material. So certain things have a cause and effect. That's the material energy, the way it functions. And here the second part is, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So again, personal responsibility for sufferings and enjoyments, either because of the law of karma or because of our attachments. This is for someone who's not a devotee. That's really important to understand. So for someone who's not a devotee, they're responsible for their sufferings and enjoyments. There actually is a lot more here. And another verse from the Bhagavad Gita that clarifies the same subject matter, at 5:15, is nadate kaschachit papam, the chaiva sukritam vibhu, ajane navritam jnanam, tena muyanti jantava. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. In other words, Krishna has nothing to do with it. He sets up the system for those who are not Krishna conscious. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. And there's an elaborate purport. So, and just finally, the verse, famous verse in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 29, how Krishna is equal to everyone. Samaham sarvabhuteshu name tveshosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tamam bhaktya maye te teshu teshoham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But here's another thing. Whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend and is in me, and I am in him. So, then the question is, okay, what about devotees? Which I said I would address that question at the end. So why do we, as devotees, suffer? You know, certainly I see devotees suffer. Well, there's several different reasons. One reason is the Krishna gives a token reaction. Prabhupada talked about the fan. When you unplug it, the fan has some motion, momentum, and it keeps going and then gradually slows down. But actually, the reason we as devotees have some suffering, if we're actually devotees, and if we're chanting, is not due to karma. Because once one chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, even Nama Bash, accidentally, what to speak of one serious about chanting, one is initiated in Krishna consciousness, there's no more karma. But what it is, in this case, it is directly it is directly the Lord putting the devotee into a position where the devotee is struggling or even suffering for the intention of personally bringing the devotee to him, back to him as quickly as possible. And that's shown in the 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 88th chapter, text 8. And it's a famous verse, and Prabhupada has commented on this verse several times. It was actually one of Prabhupada's famous favorite verses. So it's Sri Bhagavan Vacha Yashaham Anugranami Harishe Tad Danam Shanai Tato Danam Tijantyasya Swajana Dukkha Dukhitam. The personality of Godhead said, if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. So it's not only talking about money here. You know, this is a general statement. I deprive him of things that he's proud of. You know, what are we proud of? We're proud of our wealth. We're proud of our learning. We're proud of our, strength, opulence, whatever, fame. We have this false pride, and actually, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have to. This is an essential item. Actually, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it says, Dainu, or like absolute humility, is a price for devotional service. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, says in the Shikshashika, Shanada Pisani Chena Turodi Vasishna Mani Na Manadena Kirtaniya Siddhahare. So here Krishna says, I gradually deprive him of his opulence, wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. And as I said, Prabhupada would often quote this particular verse, to indicate his own situation before he came to the Western world, where his business went bankrupt, his family turned against him, even his godbrothers didn't want to help him and were discouraging him in his mission to his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So even there were other devotees who apparently, but he saw this, and the Jhansi debacle, he saw this as actually Krishna's arrangement. And we see it as Krishna's arrangement. So, of course, in retrospect, it may be easier to see. A retrospect means looking back. This is, that's why Krishna did it. But while one is suffering, then one has to be careful not to get angry with God. Why have you neglected me, abandoned me? Why are you doing this? Because, sometimes people, I mean, even non-devotees, when they see that God doesn't do what they want, like probably gave the example in World War II and World War I, the Germans and the English were praying their soldiers would come back, and many times the soldiers didn't come back from the war, and Prabhupada said they lost faith in God. So it's not that God is our servant, that Krishna is our servant, that he has to reciprocate in the way we want. But we understand why he's doing things. Again, there's that why. We understand why we came into the material world, maybe not how, and then we understand why, ultimately, why Krishna is doing this, putting us into difficulty. But our situation is quite different from that of Rukmi. In Rukmi's situation, it was offenses that caused his problem. So in the material world, there's karma and there's offenses that cause people to suffer. In the spiritual realm, it's Krishna's will as we're aspiring to become pure devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anyway, so these are some of the points. I had a lot more verses here, but just verifying my statements with verses, which is actually what Prabhupada said we should do. So anyone have any questions? We got a half minute. Yeah. The soul is always under the care of a pure devotee. Yes. Yeah. But her duty is a little bit different than your spiritual master's duty. Her duty is just like twist the arm behind your back until you say, uncle. Push you to Krishna consciousness. The spiritual master's duty is to attract you to Krishna consciousness. It's still, the goal is the same, but it's the methodology is quite different. Confirmed. Okay.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Namako Vishanu Pataya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Sammaniti Namane Namaste, that's what T.J.V. Muravani Bacha, Nagani Visesha, Sunyavati, Matsya Jagati, Satana Day. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Siva Sati Gaura Bhakti Prema Shri Advaita Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Siva Sati Gaura Bhakti Prema Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadada Siva Sati Gaura Bhakti Prema Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Gote Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Looking on it, Radha, looking on it, Radha. Looking on it, Radha, looking on it, Radha. Hey, Jayarate, Jayarate. Jai Om Vishnupad. Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Bhakta Vrindagajai Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Kijai Vrindavanam Kijai Maturanam Kijai Jagadada Sami Kijai Yamunamai Kijai Shivadila Sidevi Kijai Samveda Bhakta Vrindagajai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru Govinda. All right. Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Pranamridasvadanam Sarvadmasnapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktish Tatrapita Nimata Smaranena Kala Ekadrashita Vakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdai Brahmi Drishamihan Aninana Raga Trinada Peace Nichena Tarori Vasishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavidamba Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavatad Bhakti Adhai Takitwaye Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitamam Vishme Bhavam Muro Kripaya Tava Padapankaja Sita Duli Satrasambhachintaya Nayanam Galudashru Dareha Vadanam Gadgada Rudyagira Ulaka Nichitam Babukata Tavanama Grahame Bhavishyati Jugayitam Nimishayana Chakshusha Pravashayitam Shunyayitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Vilahe Name Javapada Panashtumam Adarshanam Armatam Karotava Yatatava Vadadatu Lampato Vat Prananatas Sevanaparaham. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you've invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen to the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he's always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shikshashtika ki jai. And beautiful.